Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we're on Carrick Boofdar playing as the Brettonians against the force of the Greenskins. And for this match I wanted to try something a little ridiculous with the Brettonians, and that was a mass infantry build. Now, against Greenskins this probably doesn't sound very intelligent because, well, Greenskins have wasps, so they're just going to steamroller over you, right? Well, I figured if I can get enough quantity, enough infantrymen, and then a little bit of cav on the sides, I should be able to hold out and let my archers kind of rain death and destruction on the Greenskins. If my opponent goes with Black Orcs, their Black Orcs are fairly expensive and probably won't be coming in too many. You probably won't have too many units of them, so you can kind of focus fire on them with all your archers. If your opponent goes with Savage Orc Big Guns, which are really common in this matchup, then you should be able to get some good damage in on them with your Peasant bows. And obviously with WoW, your opponent's going to mulch through at least one of your lines pretty quickly, but after that, if you have some reserves, you might be able to hold out pretty effectively. So that's kind of what this build was all about. For my front line here, well, actually, I guess for my Lord, first and foremost, a Prophetess of the Heavens. So this might seem a little weird or a bit of an odd choice, but this was not out of any troll intent or whatever. I simply wanted to try her out here, and I figured she could be good. I brought Curse of the Midnight Wind to counteract Wa. It also debuffs enemy armor, but that's not as important. Wood Blast to counteract enemy archers if my opponent happened to bring any, and then Harmonic Convergence to hopefully help hold the line a little bit better as well. Basically, I figured I could hit like one big area with my Curse of the Midnight Wind, another area with Harmonic Convergence, and hold up effectively that way. She also does have Arcane Conduit, and she does have the good old Assault of Stone, which is a pretty fun little ability. It does quite a bit of damage in AoE, I figured if my opponent blobs up somewhere, we can definitely nuke him. For my main line here, it is 4 units of Men-at-Arms with Shields. These guys are just there to hold, of course. They're not there to do anything. They kind of suck. But alongside them, we've got a whole bunch of Spearmen-at-Arms with Shields on the periphery. Basically, if my opponent went with a bunch of Boar Boys, Big Guns, these guys will hold up pretty well. And if my opponent just goes with more infantry and things start falling in the front line, we can push our Spearmen forward, intercept them, otherwise zone in outflankers, that sort of stuff. In the center, we do have the Beast Slayers of Bastogne as a elite reserve. These guys with their 53 melee defense and potential buffs will hold out pretty well. They do have bonus for large and AP, but that's not too important against the Greenskins, honestly. Unless my opponent brought like an Ragnarok, these guys won't be doing very much there with that. But mainly they're just a really elite, or at least by Brettonian standards, elite halberd units, so they'll be pretty good at holding and buying me time for my archers, and we've got a lot of archers. We've got 2 Peasant bows with fire arrows and a single one with pox arrows on this flank. These guys were divided into 2 control groups, and both were the same. We had 2 fire arrows up in the front, single unit with pox arrows in the back, so looking to debuff enemy troops and at the same time just focus them down with fire arrows, because fire arrows do quite a bit more damage against unarmored targets especially. Finally, for our cav contingent, we do have Knights of the Realm and Questing Knights on this end, and then on this end we've got Companions of Canal as well as the Knights of the Lionheart. I did go with cheaper cav here, except for the Knights because of the Companions of Quenelle, because I figured that without a healer, cav's going to struggle. It's definitely going to have some issues, and so I figured might as well go cheaper that because then it's not as big of a loss if, say, one of my units, Knights of the Realm or Questing Knights, gets caught out and slaughtered. It's just one unit. It's not the end of the world. Whereas if I invested in a bunch of Grail Knights and they got caught out, first of all, I wouldn't be able to protect my center pocket here, but I'd also be risking losing a lot more if they got snared and screwed over by like a Foot of Gork or something. For my opponent, he does have a skirmish contingent Vanguard here with a bunch of Forest Goblin Spider Riders looking to harass, but the main sort of threat here is actually led by Grimgor, a huge line of infantry. So my opponent brought an Orc Shaman with Foot of Gork, and here we go. A whole horde of Savage Orcs and Orc Boys here in the front line. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of cheap low-end infantry. Grimgor Ironhide with Wa and Stand Your Ground. And in the forest, we actually have 5 units of Trolls, which is a really interesting choice. It's not something you see very often. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. If you're against Brettonia, certainly they have the massive style cavalry, but against things like Ground Lights, they're going to get dumpstered. Regardless, my opponent, after deploying somewhat cautiously here, is pulling out with his Trolls, looking to support his infantry. And the infantry, as they start closing the gap, they are going to start taking a bit of pounding fire from those fire arrows. And Savage Orcs, they don't have armor, so they're not going to hold up too well to that. We're going to start focusing fire pretty aggressively, and over here, as my opponent tries to get close with his Forest Goblin Spider Riders, he's going to start taking quite a withering barrage from all of our arrows. And you can see the pox arrows, fire arrows, all those units just raining in, leaving these Spider Riders just shriveled up in the dust. In the meantime, in the front line fight, as my opponent does try to close, we actually get a brutal side charge here, coming in with our Knights, the Realm and Questing Knights, our archers wailing on these Savage Orcs and forcing a rout. And over here, as my opponent tried to get a Foot of Gork in on my Companions of Canal, they actually pulled away and shift and get a charge in on these Savage Orcs over here. My opponent at this point probably more focused here, trying to micro his light cavalry away from my archers, which are just destroying them. But because of that, he's not focused here. He hasn't popped a wall, and he's already had 2 units swept off the field. So you can see the Orc Boys and Savage Orcs being forced to rout. Over here, these Savage Orcs also focused off the field. And although my opponent is definitely chewing through the men-at-arms here, the Companions of Canal diving in to provide support are going to be able to sort of stabilize things in the center and help us out. And of course, Grimgor being an absolute menace, already up to 11 kills, and now Wa does go off as the Trolls start aiming for the line. Things are going to go south awful quick. That said, the Trolls are not fast enough to catch my Cav. You can see my Cav pulling away and running away from the fight as the archers rain in on the Trolls, just destroying them, and my opponent not really able to capitalize fully on Wa. The Savage Orcs over here withering before that focused archery fire. Peasant Bows, no joke, they do a lot of damage, and especially against armor targets like this, they're going to be brutal, and so my opponent forced to rout there before we do try to shift against the Trolls. Over here, an Assault of Stone falling down on the Orc Boys, fortunately annihilating the men-at-arms as well. We did have Harmonic Convergence up on them at the time, but these guys will not last long for this world. They're going to rout pretty shortly. But fortunately, the Companions of Canal are there. They're going to push in and help soak up this brawl and soak up this push. Elsewhere, in the meantime, my Knights running full tilt through the backline as the archers wail on the Trolls in the backline. And at this point, we are being forced to commit our Beast Slayer's Bastion into the fray, and my opponent takes advantage of this. He's able to sneak in with his Spider Riders, which is definitely not good. If we take an overarching look at the battlefield here, we can see that my opponent at this point pushing in with his Spider Riders, trying to shut down my backline. Over here, his Trolls tried to shut me down, but we intercepted them with those critically positioned spears. We pushed them in, we intercepted, we got our Knights of the Lionheart in there, we were able to break up this push and force them off. So my opponent here certainly is going to be able to force off these Peasant Bows, but a big misplay in my opinion here, not splitting his Spider Riders, getting them on multiple units of archers. He should try to shut down multiple units of archers if possible, because of this, he's going to get caught out here, focused fire by the archers, and things are going to go south pretty quickly. In the meantime, this pocket of Peasant Bows with fire arrows and pox arrows just wailing on these Trolls. Certainly Trolls do regen, and they could potentially come back at much better status than before with a lot of models, but you know, honestly at this point we're doing pretty well over here. The Knights of the Realm, which have been getting chased around the map by these Trolls, finally do get caught, but at this point it's too little too late. My opponent needed these guys removed ages ago, and although he does get some good killing done here with the Trolls, it's really far too late. And you can see the questing Knights are still around. We've still got most of our cav on the field. These questing Knights over here, we get a nice little another Curse of the Midnight Wind there. The Beast Slayer's Bastion holding the line here, and our Spearmen actually pull back to intercept those Trolls. And our Enchanter or Prophetess here running amok, distracting and chasing off all these Spider Riders. But at this point, it just doesn't matter. Certainly, we do have some routing shooting, but for my opponent at this point, it is going to be GG. He does force off these Knights of the Realm away, and the battle will still go on for just a little bit longer, but you can see at this point the Trolls are broken. The Orc Shaman is not going to last much longer. He doesn't have good melee stats, honestly. They're respectable by, say, caster, like old Warhammer 1 caster standards, like a Necromancer or an Empire caster, but really, he's not a great combatant. He's only got 20 melee defense, so he's going to get forced off pretty quickly here. The Beast Slayer's Bastion doing some major work, and Grimgor also starting to take some damage, and my opponent is going to be forced to rout from the field. You can see the Trolls here in full flight, the cavalry now swinging around to dive in here in the back. I almost called the Fey Enchantress again. The Prophet is over there chasing those guys away. The Spiders do get in our Peasant Bows with pox arrows, but they're just not powerful enough. We're just able to pivot with our archers and just rain death and destruction on them. And you can see the Peasant Bows here haven't even lost a model. They actually probably lost some models there to friendly fire. So that is what it is. At this point, it is just game. You can see some Trolls getting mucked up here. You can see the Peasants screaming, "Kill them before they kill us," which is hilarious. The Peasants always have some ridiculous quotes, but the Trolls really not holding up. Brettonia firepower really not bad. Another Wa does go down, but at this point it's far too little, far too late. That firepower from the Peasants really no joke, and my opponent is forced to GG out, or well, she's shattered. So well played to Badriel. Certainly an interesting comp against an interesting comp. I thought both builds were a little silly, but it was fun. I think it's actually a viable strategy for Brettonia against the Greenskins. If depending on where your opponent goes build-wise, I think you've got a decent selection of options here with mass infantry. It's not necessarily what I recommend as the most competitive. If you want to go super competitive, you really try hard, then probably heavy cav play with like Fey Enchantress or Luan maybe for the Fear and Terror. Or otherwise, you can bring like Hippogriffs for the Fear and Terror, but regardless, some sort of heavy cav play. Or the Green Knight. It's probably the way to go. That can work. Don't get me wrong. But I do think you can pull this off. I don't think there's really many builds Greenskins can bring that are really going to mulch through this that quickly. Sure, Black Orcs are going to dumpster this infantry. Basically anything Greenskins bring will dumpster in front line pretty quick when WoW pops off. But you do still have some decent cav support here. Your opponent's going to struggle there. Against Savage Orcs and even Orc Boys, Peasant and Savage Orc Big Guns especially, Peasant Bows with Fires will do immense damage. And honestly, against Big Guns and Snasty Skulkers, which are more common sight here than some normal Savage Orcs, Peasant Bows will do some devastating work. Fire arrows are actually really solid here. Certainly you could cut the fire arrows, try to just go with normal ones, but I really do like the fire arrows. Plus, in this situation, the fire actually ended up being helpful against the trolls, but regardless, it's a very powerful combo. You definitely do need to like the cheaper cav here to counteract enemy light cav. My opponent could have gone much heavier on the light cav. Personally, I do like bringing like a handful of Wolf Riders, the Moon Howlers, and whatnot in this matchup if I'm playing as Greenskins, because of how good they are disrupting backline. But my opponent did not do that. But he did have these Riders, and potentially I could have played a little more safely with my cavalry and had them deployed to defend against these skirmishers. But I figured I didn't have to when I saw that my opponent didn't bring any light cav. But yeah, it's a fun build. The Prophetess, not bad, honestly. She's got a lot of debuffs. Now, sure, she's not healing, but with this sort of build, you don't need healing because your army is trash, so it would be nice to have healing on, like, the companions, but that's really it. The rest of these troops just aren't that expensive. They're not that valuable, so you don't really need the heals, and the debuffs are much more useful in that situation, I think. For my opponent, bit of an interesting build. I wouldn't recommend Grimgor as a series comp pick. I think Wartag is a much better choice. You get an all-in-one caster and damage dealer, even though he's not the best damage dealer. Some damage. He does have, of course, Effigy the Git. He does have his Bone Staff, all his buffs, debuffs, yada yada. He's a great lord. Grimgor really not very good. He is a fairly cheap choice, I guess, but I really wouldn't recommend him. Otherwise, the Troll's interesting choice, and actually not necessarily bad against Brettonia. Brettonia doesn't have a lot of fear and terror, so with Trolls, you can. They're probably going to stick around okay. I guess fear is not relevant against it, but terror is actually pretty important when you're dealing with Trolls if you can force a quick route that way. But against Brettonia, who doesn't have too many ways to quickly scare Trolls off the field, if you're able to combo them with infantry, and I think if my opponent had a little more light cav to really harass the backline against my comp or against a more generic Brettonian comp, the Trolls could probably do pretty well stacked on top of the infantry. Personally, though, I would probably recommend Nasty Skulkers. I'd recommend Savage Orc Big Guns, maybe some Boar Boy Big Guns. But regardless, well played to Bad Drill here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun. You got to see some Brettonian peasant play. If you liked it, mash that like button, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any comments, secrets, and any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to post them, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.